Good morning, Mr. P again, and here we are trying to do part 5 of our writing. We're at a stage where our hero, whoever it's going to be for you guys, is being chased relentlessly by these camera droids. So today what we'll do is we'll just have a little look through, see what this part of the story is all about, and then I just want to talk about how we create two things happening at the same time. So without further ado, I'll put myself into a little box and then we'll take it forward. So I need to, what do I need to do? I need to do that, I need to do that, right. Okay, so I should be in the little box any minute now. Ooh, there I am. Oh. Okay, good stuff. So here we are, the chase. Plan B, I've called it. So obviously they were chased before and it wasn't working, so they need to have a plan B. Now then, let's have a little peep here. Where were we? Let's go down here. There we are, plan B. So what did we do last time? We had a quick little look here, didn't we? And they threw some of these flares behind them. But it didn't really work. The drone was still chasing them. Okay, so part B, part B, what happens? Let's just remind ourselves. Again, if you haven't watched the video is called Ruin, and you need to watch that video, or else this just doesn't make sense. Okay, so the droid, so in my case it's a she turns off to go to a different part of the motorway. But the droid also has a plan B as well. They're not catching who they're trying to catch. So what do is that they drop these two heat-seeking missiles or camera droids, or I don't know what you want to call them. Maybe this is a nice little phrase here, that the rockets flickered as they locked onto her, in my case. So here, look, there's the camera droids, and they had these sort of little flashing bits of flame along the bottom there, which help them speed towards their target. And they may kind of like flickering. That's why I use this flicker, because it's the light was on and off, wasn't it? So it's a good way of describing that. Flicker, 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 isn't it? Yeah, good. Okay, so yeah, then this is where they are. She's got some. We become aware that she's got some flares. She can't outrun the locator drone, I think we called it. So she's got these little flares, I guess we could call them, attached to the side of her bike, some kind of like little defense preparation she's made here. So she seems to sort of have to hit them on the bottom of it to activate the flare. And there seems to be some kind of timer, and she throws them behind her and it explodes and hopefully distracts or destroys the things that are chasing her. So she glances behind, she looks behind, she sees that she's not working, so she sets off the first flare. It kind of fizzes, doesn't it? Again, that's another word. Seems like our words start with F today, doesn't it? Flickered and fizzed. And this flare then bounces down the road, doesn't it? And then it explodes, but the missiles were unharmed. So a good idea, a good plan, but unsuccessful. Then what does she do? Start a new little paragraph here. They had to try again. Up ahead, they saw a car. If they tossed the flare into the car, then maybe the car might explode and stop the missiles. I don't know whether you listened to the video, that there was a really nice sort of clunking noise as the flare bounced along and went under the car. Clattered, I thought was quite a good word there. It clattered under the car. The car exploded, but the missiles didn't stop again. So yeah, it's not working, is it? It's not working. So here she had one bomb left, one chance left, and then she saw a signpost, and I don't know whether you caught that. It says here, look, tunnel, no trucks. So she saw a signpost for the old tunnel. So this is her plan B, isn't it? Yeah. Plan A is to toss these flares behind her, explode the bombs, missile stops. She tries once, she tries twice, she's only got one left, so she needs a plan B, really. And that's kind of where we'd write it. That's probably about 2 or 3 paragraphs of writing. It's not a lot, just a couple of paragraphs of writing. They deploy the drones. She uses her flares, fails, uses it again underneath the car. It fails. She's got one left, plan B. So that really is your structure for your next piece of writing. Like I say, on the website, all of these lesson plans are there with the examples as well. So feel free to go and have a little look at those if you need to. I'll pause the video anytime. So today, just quickly, I wanted to have a little peep at how do we talk about 2 things that are happening at the same time. And really, we need to, so it's all about understanding the English language. And the key point really is this here is understanding clauses, how clauses fit together is really at the heart of understanding English and being a good writer. So what is a clause? Sometimes people say we learn clauses in classes, but sometimes it just doesn't stick. So let's just go through it again. What's the difference between a clause and a sentence? Well, a clause effectively needs to have a verb in it. It needs to have a verb, and that's a doing word, isn't it? Sometimes lower down the school we call them doing words. They're verbs, really, aren't they? Verbs are action words, and they describe things that we do. Think, jump, eat, run. These are all verbs, aren't they? So a clause is where you've got a group of words together, and one of those words is a verb. If it doesn't have a verb in it, it's not a clause. It'll be something else. All right? So that's a key point. That's a key point. A clause needs to have a verb in it. Second key point is that the words that are all together, they need to make sense. They need to make sense. What do we mean by making sense? Is that there needs to be a meaning there. So let's have a look at the first sentence I've got here. Look, it says here, jump she pickle hat red. Jump she pickle hat red. Number one, is it a collection of words in the English language? Well, yes, it is. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words there. There's 5 words all together. That's a collection of words, isn't it? Okay, let's have a little look here. Does it have a verb in it? Is there some kind of action word in there? Yes, there is. Jump is our action word. Jump, that's our verb, isn't it? What are you doing? I'm jumping. What did it do? Jump. So jump is our verb. So does it have a collection of words? Yes. Does it have a verb? Yes. Let's have a look at our last thing. Does it make sense? Does this collection of words have meaning? Jump she pickle hat red. No, it doesn't, does it? And there's probably some things that we could probably do to give that collection of words meaning, but as it stands, it doesn't. Mostly it's sort of word order, isn't it? And the words are not in the right order, or maybe there's some words missed out, and that means it doesn't have meaning. So usually that's what we understand by does it have meaning? Are the words in the right order? Are there any words missed out? If there's words missed out, it might not make sense. If the words are in the wrong order, it might not make sense. So this sentence here, this collection of words here, is it a clause? No, it's not. No, it's not. It does have a verb, but it doesn't make sense by itself. Okay. Okay, let's have a little peep at this one here. Is this a clause? The camera droids locked onto their target. Does it have a verb? Yes, locked on. That's a verb, that's what's happening. Does it make sense? Yes, it does. Let's have a look at this one here. She threw the flare behind her. Does it have a verb? Yes, it does. To throw. What's she doing? She's throwing. Yeah, it does have a verb. Does it make sense? She threw the flare behind her. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. So it's a clause. She drove the Norton 7000 even faster. Does it have a verb? Yes, it does. Drove, to drive. I drive my motorbike. I drove my car. It's in the past tense, isn't it? She drove the Norton 7000 even faster. Is it a clause? Yes, it is. It has a verb and it makes sense. Okay, so we've got 3 clauses. And this is, let's just clear something up really, really quickly here. What's the difference between a clause and a sentence? A sentence is when a clause has been punctuated. So at the moment, is this a clause or a sentence? It's a clause, yeah? But if I punctuate it, yeah, capital letter, full stop, it is now a sentence, okay? And that's your difference between a clause and a sentence. A sentence is a punctuated clause. Now you can have more complicated sentences that are built up of more than one clause. Usually 2 is enough. And when we need to join those 2 clauses with, say, conjunctions and things like that. But that effectively is the difference between a clause and a sentence, is that it is punctuated. If it is punctuated, it is a sentence. If it is not punctuated, it is a clause. And that's why punctuating, using full stops and capital letters, is so important. Okay, good. So let's have a little look. What I want to look at today is how do we talk about 2 things happening at the same time? Because it's quite an action-packed scene here, and there's a lot going on. You know, there's 2 things. So there's a verb here, isn't there, looking behind, but they're also doing something else, aren't they? They're actually riding a motorbike. So there's 2 verbs happening at the same time. There's riding the motorbike, there's looking ahead, there's preparing the flare. There's lots of verbs all happening at the same time. So how do we do that in the English language? Well, there's one nice way of doing it, which is where you take the verb and you stick an ing on the front of it, and then you pop that little clause at the front of the sentence. What do I mean by that? Well, here, let's have a look at this sentence here. The camera droids locked onto their target, and we're talking about this bit here, aren't we? They're locking onto the target here. But they're also doing something else at the same time. So they're coming out of there, dropping down from the main droid, aren't they? And they're locking on. So there's these 2 things. They're dropping from the main droid, but as they're dropping down, they're kind of locking onto the target. So you've got this idea of dropping down, and you've also got the idea of locking on. So 2 verbs happening at the same time. So here, let's just put in some little bit of text here. Okay, so how can we get 2 things happening at the same time? What do we say? Drop. Drop is our other verb, isn't it? Yeah, they drop from the main droid. So a nice little dodge is that we can join these 2 ideas, these two clauses together, this idea of dropping, by taking the verb and adding ing to it. Now, if you want to get technical, this is called the gerund, and that's where you take a verb and you pop ing on the end. So dropping, what was it dropping from? It was dropping from the main droid camera, comma, the camera droids locked onto their target. And now here, you've got your 2 clauses here, haven't you? Dropping from the main droid. This is one clause. Does it have a verb? Yes, it does, to drop. Yeah. This is my second clause. The camera droids locked onto their target. Does it have a verb? Yes, locked on. Now we can join those 2 with a comma here, and we can stick a full stop at the end. We've got a capital letter, and together these now become a sentence. Now, usually we can't join 2 clauses together with a comma, but we can this time because we're starting this clause with the verb. So that's a sort of a special exception to the rule, if you like. So dropping from the main droid, the camera droids locked onto their target. I don't really like the repetition of droid here, and I probably would look back at trying to change that in the future. But that's one way to put two things happening at the same time in one sentence. Let's have a little peep here. She threw the flare behind her. So here, she threw the flare behind her. So she threw the flare behind her. What was she doing there, though? She was also kind of looking back, right, as she was doing that. So how can we get this idea that she glanced back and she threw the flare behind her? She's doing the two things at the same time. So how can we do that? So I don't know. She looked, glanced is probably better. She glanced, oops, she glanced back. She glanced back. Okay, let's get rid of that capital letter because it's not a sentence yet, is it? Okay, let's have a look at this one here. Is this a clause? Does it have a verb? Yes. Glance, to glance means to look, doesn't it? Does it make sense by itself? She glanced back. Yes, it does. Okay, so I've now got two clauses. How can I join these together? She glanced back. She threw the flare behind her. I've got two clauses, two verbs, two things happening kind of at the same time. So how can I put them together to make one sentence? There's a nice little phrase here where we can use while. While she glanced back. Now, while is conjunction, and it joins two clauses together. So the job of while here is to join these two clauses together. So while she glanced back, she threw the flare behind her. And now we can punctuate that to turn all of these two clauses into one sentence. And so this little conjunction here, while, sort of means two things happening at the same time. While this happened, same time. Yeah. You can also use another way, whilst. Whilst is another way of joining them together. So whilst she glanced back, she threw the flare behind her. And lots of people ask, what's the difference between whilst and while? Well, the general answer to that is Americans like while and British like whilst. American English, you generally don't hear while, but British English, we do use whilst. And whilst perhaps is considered to be more formal. Okay, so whilst this was happening, yes? So it can have a sort of a more formal edge to it. But effectively, their job in a sentence is the same. So they are both conjunctions and they both help join clauses together that have verbs that we want to imply are happening at the same time. Okay, so the same thing. Okay, so there we go. That's two examples of how we can get two things happening at the same time. Use gerund for our first clause, and then put in our second clause. Don't forget that comma there. We can use this conjunction here, while, to join the glancing back and the flare being thrown. So that joins these two clauses together and tells us they're happening at the same time. The other one is really our best friend, as. Now, as is really good for joining two clauses to imply this idea that there's two things happening at the same time. So she drove the Norton 7000 even faster. So what could be happening? What could be happening at this time? I don't know. I suppose the droids are chasing her harder, aren't they? So let's just pop that in, shall we? Insert, let's get a text box there. So I don't know, the camera droids, the camera droids chased harder. Okay, let's just get rid of my capital letter there because it's not actually a sentence at the moment. It's just a clause. So let's have a little peek here. The camera droids chased her harder. So let's just stick that at the front there. I don't know, which way could we have? She drove the Norton 7000 even faster. The camera droids chased her harder. I don't know. Quite like these little adverbs here, like faster, harder. They chased her harder. She drove faster. Those little adverbs, they make a big difference. Let's just pop it around this way around. This way around. Okay, that looks good. So we've got two clauses, haven't we? This is one clause. This is our second clause. How do I know it's a clause? That's right, it needs to have a verb. What's the verb in this sentence? Chased. What's the verb in this sentence? Drove. So we've got two clauses. Now we need to join those together to make a sentence, don't we? We've got two things happening at the same time. So as I said, we can use our good friend as. Now as the camera droids chased her harder, because that's the end of our clause here, we need to notion that by adding in our comma. We add a comma at the end of the clause. Yeah, at the end. Where do I put my comma, Mr. Brewer? Put it at the end of your clause. That's where you put it. Okay. So this is our conjunction here. As, that tells us two things are happening at the same time. That's the job of that word as. It tells us two things are happening at the same time. As the camera droids chased her harder, she drove the Norton 7000 even faster. Here now, I'm going to punctuate it and turn these two clauses into one complete sentence. So there you go, really. That's just three examples of how you can get two things to be happening at the same time. The recap, you can use the gerund, so start with the verb in your first clause, comma, second clause. You can use the conjunction while or whilst, first clause, second clause, two things happening at the same time. Or you can use the conjunction as, first clause, second clause. So that's a really, really great way to join your clauses together and improve your writing, really. If you don't join your clauses together, then you just end up with sentences that are just one clause, and you'll see that in very early writing, won't you? He went to the shop. The shop was a long way. It took him a long time to get there. He bought some fish, you know, and you end up with very, very easy style of reading, isn't it, and writing. So the more complex you become, the more you play around with these this relationship of how clauses fit together. And that really is the secret. You can be really, really playful there. And that's how all good humour starts, isn't it? All jokes are breaking the rules with how the English language fits together. So be creative and have fun. Bye-bye.